Yo people, welcome to another video with CMDAV, and we got another banger story time, and we're gonna do the Earl Kelly story time today. Earl arrived in the first episode of the 4th season of Waterloo Road alongside his dysfunctional family. It's obvious from the first few scenes that he's a psycho and the obvious violent person of the family, but he's fiercely protective of his family in very many ways. He's introduced with his whole family: alcoholic mother Rose, older and responsible brother Marley, 14-year-old only sister Sam, 11-year-old softy brother Denzel, and baby brother Prince. He is immediately portrayed as a hard-as-nail bad boy when he opens his bag of belongings and we see that he has a gun with him, and then he later throws the taxi driver against his car because Sam was trying to pay for the taxi ride and Earl didn't want to seem as a charity case. Because the taxi driver felt sorry and he was saying that no, it's fine, they don't have to pay for it at all. This is where the head teacher Rachel and deputy head Eddie step in by removing the taxi driver from the premises and threatening Earl into behaving straight away. Rachel instantly gives Earl a warning about violence. On his way to class, Earl passes Janice and Maxine. At first it appears that Earl is looking at Janice and he's interested in her, but it's actually Maxine which he's eyeing up, to which she notices but she doesn't tell Janice this, so basically she makes Janice look like a mug. Janice then says that Earl looks well fit, and then Maxine just brushes it off and scoffs. Earl makes a first bad impression on Steph, who is Maxine's foster carer. When he falls asleep in the French lesson, she wakes him up and scolds him for sleeping, and then he cheekily replies, "Sorry miss, I thought I was at home, I'll just have 10 more minutes," and rests both feet on the table. And then obviously you know how Steph is. Steph is not going to take that lying down, so she orders him to get his pencil case out and start doing some work, because what's going on, how you just resting your feet in the class while everyone else is doing work. So he does this, he opens his bag, and then you see the gun again, and at this point you're thinking, you've seen the gun twice in maybe 10-20 minutes, so something with the gun must be happening, at least in this episode. Just the foreshadowing is mad, and you don't even know what's going to happen though. That's the mad thing. Earl makes some enemies during his first day. Paul and Bolton get on the wrong side of Earl when Paul purposely knocks into Earl on the way to his first class with Steph. Later on, Bolton shoves Paul and accidentally lands on Earl. Earl responds by shoving Paul against one of the school lockers and tells Bolton not to mess with him. Tom then intervenes, sending Paul and Bolton off. 1-to-1, Tom tries to reason with Earl, who then proceeds to throw Tom against a locker too. Tom pushes Earl off, and Earl then makes a gun with his fingers and presses them against Tom's head. Tom's not frightened by this and tells Earl he'll ignore the violent gesture because it's Earl's first day, but if it happens again then the boy's out basically. So he gave him the benefit of the doubt. And this kind of instigates the feud between Tom and the Kelly family as a whole. At the end of the first episode, Earl is on a rampage and holds a gun in his hand as he storms into the playground. Since Paul alerted the staff that there was a gun in the school, police have now swarmed the grounds, and Earl persuades his younger brother Denzel to take the gun, lying that Denzel, because he's age 11, will get a lighter sentence in a young offenders institution rather than a 16-year-old would get. Denzel got birded off. Denzel was arrested and taken to prison, and obviously the family was upset, and Marley made a good point. He's an 11-year-old, where is he getting a gun from? Which is the truth? Obviously his older brother gave it to him, but still. One of the last scenes of the first episode, we see Rose, who is drunk, putting sausages through the letterbox, saying that her Denzel won't need it because he's in prison, and it's revealed that they are the next door neighbours of Tom, Dante and Chloe. In episode 2, the Kellys throw a house party. Earl and Maxine flirt to Janice's horror and disappointment in Maxine. Janice's opinion of Earl changed quickly in the first episode after Earl went to Chloe's business and he has a buzz cut and he asked for a haircut. But Dante obviously thought, this guy, what's he doing? So he sent him away, and Janice from then thought he was a creep. But Maxine was looking at him like, yeah, this guy's nice, but she didn't want to say anything. So back at the party now, Earl offers Maxine drugs, which she laughs and declines after being badly hooked on them in season 2 and getting pregnant because she was out of her mind on them. They end up sleeping together, which Rose knows and approves of. Maxine lies to Steph that she stayed at Chloe's for the night. Tom, the Kellys' neighbour, stops the party with Marley's help. Later on, Tom goes to shout at the Kellys for discarded rubbish and people in his garden from the party the night before. He sees Earl and Maxine sit up from the sofa in their garden after clearly having sex previously there. Their relationship blossoms over the next few episodes. Earl's rivalry with Tom intensifies as he starts killing pigeons and leaving them on Tom's doorstep. In episode 5, he claims that the pet cat has been dropping the birds outside Tom's house, but Marley later reveals to Flick that they don't even have a cat. During Drugs Awareness Day run by Flick's dad, Marley is set up with a positive drugs test. In truth, the negative test for Marley had been swapped with Flick's positive test by her father. He was disappointed that Flick was having the odd spliff here and there and decided to get her boyfriend Marley, who was severely disapproved of, thrown out. Because his siblings knew that he was the best out of all of them and would never do anything like that, Earl and Sam followed suit and left with him. Not before Earl showed his English class a photo of Eddie in his youth supporting cannabis. It is later proved that Marley's test was negative and Flick's was positive, so the Kellys are apologised to and get to stay. Flick's dad, Ralph, resigns as school governor, but he bitterly reports Rose to social services. Her 5 kids are taken away, including baby Prince. Marley is placed in a youth hostel. Sam goes to stay with Matt. Denzel remains in the prison. Prince is most likely in care or foster home, and Earl has a foster placement too. Earl runs off to stay at his stepdad Reynold Kelly's house mostly. Reynold shows up after a call from Earl and demands that Sam leaves Matt's flat to live with Reynold in Rose's house. Rose is convinced by Reynold to move into a bedsit whilst Reynold stays at the Kelly's household and wins the kids back. However, Sam refuses to leave Matt's. Earl and Reynold then storm over to Matt's after taking Sam's keys. They trash the flat and take Sam. Reynold is later arrested after Rose calls the police, and Matt safely gets to keep fostering Sam. Earl's relationship with Maxine continues to be destructive. They are caught having sex in a toilet cubicle by Tom, and Steph bans them from seeing each other under her roof. However, Grantley turns up on Steph's doorstep after his marriage to Fleur takes a brief hit when Steph's lies get out of hand. Occupied with Grantley's troubles, Steph fails to notice her own as Maxine sneaks out constantly to be with Earl, or sneaks Earl in. In episode 7, Steph visits Maxine in her room and warns her. She said, and I quote, "Not to waste away on some little waster like Earl Kelly. You're beautiful, Max. You can do better." As soon as she leaves, the camera pans down below Maxine's bed, and Earl is hiding with a sinister smile on his face. What's crazy is, what Steph's saying is basically foreshadowing the destruction and the death of Maxine. In episode 8, Earl's doing his best to convince Maxine that they should have a baby. He wants them to finally have what they never got from their own childhoods: a family and a home and proper stability. Max sees Earl being hassled by a girl named Jade. She later confronts them both. Earl insists it's nothing and that he loves Maxine, but Jade says otherwise. She says that she had Earl's baby and he's not paying up. Maxine is shocked at this, as she had a stillborn called Charlotte in similar conditions with Lewis Seddon, equally as nasty and not likely to cough up the cash. She also feels surprised because she and Earl had been planning to rent their own place and start a family together. Jade shows Maxine where she is staying with a 3-day-old baby who looks very ill and poorly looked after. Maxine tells Earl she knows of his deceit and tries to end the relationship. Back at Steph's house, Earl and Maxine have a showdown. Earl asks furiously, "Are you dumping me?" To which Maxine sharply retorts, "Well done." Earl pulls out a gun and aims it at Maxine. Janice, who had ran off to get help, returns and tries to stop Earl. He throws her against the wall. Just as Janice gets up and Steph's arrived, Earl pulls the trigger and runs. Maxine dies in the arms of those who loved and cared for her the most, Steph and Janice. Earl starts to run away with the gun in his hand from where he shot Maxine. But he stops running, he starts walking, and he can hear the police sirens behind him. He walks slowly and slower before he stops and sits on the pavement, puts the gun by his side, and he starts to cry. And he starts to say, "She didn't listen, she didn't listen." And that's the last we ever see of Earl Kelly. Interestingly, actor Reese Noy, who played Earl Kelly, also played Noel Parkin in the 2nd season of the show, who was shown dealing drugs to Maxine. So I don't know what Waterloo Road were doing with that one. They could have changed the character or something. Come on, guys. Also, episode 8 of season 4 was not supposed to be the last time we saw Earl. He was supposed to make a guest appearance in season 7 in Sam's final episode. Originally, there was supposed to be a scene where Sam says a final goodbye to Earl. However, the scene wasn't able to be filmed, as at the time of the episode production, Earl's actor Reese Noy was unavailable due to being in Croatia with the Game of Thrones filming production. That is the end of the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Personally, I did not really like the character Earl Kelly. I like the family, the Kellys, and they were an iconic family, and they will always be an iconic family, but Earl Kelly, I didn't really see him as a big character, but obviously it might have just been because of how short he was there for, or maybe it was just because I just saw him doing all his nonsense for no reason, and then obviously kill Maxine as well. Like, what are you doing? So maybe it was that, but personally I didn't really like the character, but still an interesting storyline. So yeah, that's my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is in the comments. Make sure you also like and subscribe. Thank you, stay safe, and peace, love.